After years of waiting, Apple has finally refreshed one of their tablets that literally has a cult following. This is the iPad mini 7, but has this iPad been worth the wait? Let's find out. The 6th generation iPad mini last released back in 2021, 3 years ago. And just a couple weeks ago, Apple pretty quietly announced the brand new iPad mini 7th generation. And in a lot of ways, it's very similar to the iPad mini 6. In fact, the form factor of this device is almost identical. And for a 3-year gap, while it's not surprising that Apple hasn't updated the exterior design of this device, it's not ideal. Sure, the shape, the form factor, the size, the weight, all of those are reasons why people love the iPad mini. They love the fact that it's sort of a middle ground between your phone and a tablet. For a lot of people, because of the width and also the weight of the iPad mini, it's a tablet that you could literally just one hand, like grip the whole way around. I don't have especially large hands. They're not small, but they're also not huge, and I can very easily hold the tablet like this with a lot of room to spare on the edges of my fingers. So like I said, I'm not totally surprised that Apple didn't change the form factor of the iPad mini, but things like these bezels do make it feel a little outdated, especially when the bezels in something like the iPad Pro are so thin and so small. For a device like this, which is already so small, having bezels that are this thick, at least ratio-wise, kind of makes it feel a little bit older than it should. First, let's talk about the price point of the brand new iPad mini. So this device starts with 128 gigabytes for a retail price of $499, essentially $500. I love the fact that Apple increased the base storage included in the iPad mini from 64 gigs on the previous version to 128 gigs. I finally feel like I have enough storage on this device. You can also upgrade to 256 or 512 if you want. Of course, each one of those comes with a $100 price bump. And if you're someone who feels like you need cellular on your iPad, you can also do that for a $150 price bump on top of that. The new iPad mini comes in similar colors to the previous generation, however they are slightly more pastel than the previous generation. You've got blue, you've got starlight, you've got purple, and you've also got space gray. I went with blue because I really like blue. It's one of my favorite colors, and I think it looks great in this sort of washed out pastel blue. Now, where the new iPad mini sits in the iPad pricing lineup is kind of interesting because it isn't the base iPad. That's actually literally just the iPad, which is $100 cheaper. It is also slightly cheaper than the iPad Air. However, with the iPad Air, you can usually find one of those on sale for cheaper than the iPad mini. So it's kind of a weird middle ground device, and I think if you're just going to buy an iPad, the iPad is literally the way to go because it's just the cheapest. Whereas you buy the iPad mini because you like the form factor and you're willing to pay a little bit more to get this form factor. And technically the specs are better in the iPad mini than in the standard iPad. Apple doesn't update their iPads all at once, so because of that, you have different iPads in different life cycles than other iPads, and so some are more outdated than they should be for the price point, and it's kind of a weird situation. So what I try to do personally is think of my use case. What am I going to use this iPad for? And then find an iPad in that sort of segment, and then try and find the newest version of that iPad if it's something I want to keep for a long time, or the cheapest version if I'm trying to save the most money. But the iPad mini is kind of different in that respect because it really is a completely different size than any of the other iPads. And again, weight-wise, it's very light, it's very easy to hold in one hand. However, interestingly enough, compared to the now slightly older iPad Pro, even though it is the latest iPad Pro, it's actually not as thin as that device. Like, look at the size difference there. The iPad Pro is definitely thinner than the iPad mini by a pretty significant margin. Sure, it's because you have more space to work with on the iPad Pro, and the iPad Pro is heavier than the iPad mini, but if you're looking for the thinnest iPad, which is not always something that people are looking for, then the iPad Pro is the way to go. It is like 4 times more expensive though. Moving on to the screen, you've got an 8.3-inch liquid retina display, which is fine. Unfortunately, it still only gets up to 500 nits of brightness, and it still only has a 60 hertz refresh rate, which for a lot of people who don't care about refresh rates or won't even notice it, it's not a huge deal. But if you're a tech nerd like me, it's a little disappointing. It isn't a deal breaker though. However, the one thing that might be a deal breaker when it comes to the screen is the jelly-like scrolling, essentially the screen tearing that happens when you scroll up and down on the display. Now the reason for that is because of how the screen refreshes, at least when you're in vertical mode like this, and compared to the 6th generation iPad mini, it is significantly better on the iPad mini 7, but it is still something that is ever so slightly still there. Now for me personally, doesn't really bother me, at least not on this new version of the iPad mini, but there are people out there who it will bother. So if you're one of those people, maybe don't get an iPad mini. Obviously, because it's been 3 years since we last got an iPad mini, they've upped the specs of the iPad mini 7th generation. Instead of an A15 chip like you had in the previous version, you now have an A17 Pro chip, which apparently is optimized for Apple Intelligence, which is a feature that I still haven't really been able to use. I mean, it's sort of there and they keep adding features to it, so it is getting better. It just feels like such an unfinished feature at this point. They should have never touted it as their flagship feature. Wait until next year, when it's a lot more finished. Because as we've seen many times with Apple features, they do get very, very good over time, and I'm sure it will, but right now, it's just not a selling feature for really any Apple product, in my opinion. But hey, if you get the new iPad mini 7th generation, you can use Apple Intelligence, and like I said, in the future, it will get better. So if you want a future-proof iPad mini, really the only way to go is the iPad mini 7th generation. In addition to the A17 Pro chip, you've also now got 8 gigabytes of RAM, so it is a significantly faster iPad than the previous iPad mini. So if you do things like edit videos in Final Cut, or you really like to game on some more intensive games, then this is the iPad mini to get. I spent more time than I'm willing to admit testing out the gaming functionality of the iPad mini, and I've got to say, it's very, very capable. Every game that I play on all of my other Apple devices ran totally fine on the iPad mini 7th generation, even though those other devices are way more powerful. Even games like Call of Duty Mobile, which granted is a mobile game, still looked amazing on the iPad mini 7th generation, and I played it with the PlayStation 5 controller, because you can hook that up to the iPad mini as well, and it just felt like I was playing a console game. It was great. Fruit Ninja looked good, all the games that I tested looked really good, and there was no stuttering or lag issues whatsoever. One of my favorite new features on the iPad mini 7 is the addition of Apple Pencil Pro support, meaning you can use your Apple Pencil Pro or your Apple Pencil USB-C on the iPad mini 7. And what's great is that the iPad Pencil Pro still has all the same features that you have on the iPad Pro on the iPad mini 7, like hover, barrel roll, squeeze to bring up menus. It's a really great additional feature to the iPad mini 7, especially for things like note-taking or sketching on the train. Like every other iPad, the iPad mini is great for media consumption, whether that's using social media apps or watching YouTube videos or Hulu or Netflix or whatever it is that you want to do on your iPad. And all of that kind of leads me into my point of who the iPad mini 7th generation is actually for. The iPad mini 7 is truly a tablet, and that's it. The newer Pro iPads and larger iPads are all trying to be sort of computer hybrids. They're not just trying to be a tablet. And you know that because not only are they more expensive and have just insane processors inside, they also feature things like Magic Keyboard support, which the iPad mini actually doesn't support. It can support Bluetooth keyboards, but it's not the kind of thing that you're going to buy a Magic Keyboard case for. In fact, you can't even if you wanted to. The iPad mini 7th generation is powerful enough to play all of the games that you'd want to play, watch all of the movies that you want to watch, and even do things like sketch with the Apple Pencil Pro or edit content in Final Cut. So it's a very capable tablet, but it is just a tablet. And I think for a lot of people, that's all they really want. I can tell you from personal experience that the iPad Pro that I spent $2,000 on is great. I love it. I sketch on it all the time. I do all sorts of gaming on it, and I even do some work on it. Not a lot, but some. And I've never found myself in a situation where I'm like, I'm gonna use this over my laptop. I use my laptop for everything. Editing videos, watching media, basically everything. The iPad Pro is just a nice additional tablet that I have on the side. It did replace my Wacom drawing tablet, which is something that I used all the time, and now I use my iPad for that, but generally I still use my laptop for all of my super performance intensive tasks. So even for me, someone who I'd consider to be an Apple power user, the iPad Pro is not enough of a computer to be a computer yet. And that's what I love about the iPad mini. It's not trying to be anything it's not. It's truly a small tablet that's excellent for traveling, excellent for note-taking, excellent for playing games. That's all you need it for. This is the kind of thing that you throw in your carry-on luggage or you bring with you on the train, or maybe you keep in the bathroom when you go into the bathroom. It's a great little tablet to use for whatever you want to use a little tablet for. And sure, there are cases where your phone would suffice. Like if you're watching YouTube videos, sure, just watch them on your phone. But you still can't use your Apple Pencil Pro on your iPhone, so if you want to sketch down notes or just have a little sketch pad with you wherever you go that's not actually paper, the iPad mini is excellent for that. So is the iPad mini 7 worth it? Well, in my opinion, if you're the kind of person that is just looking for a small portable tablet for traveling or whatever you need a small portable tablet for, then yes, the iPad mini 7 is great. It's great for media consumption, it's great for playing games, sketching, drawing, whatever you want to do, but it's not going to replace your computer. And I really don't think anyone expected it to do that. So for people looking for an excellent small tablet, this is a great way to go. If you already have an iPad mini 6th generation and you want some of the newer features, like maybe the battery is degraded over time, or maybe you want Apple Intelligence, or you want a slightly faster tablet experience, then sure, upgrade to the new iPad mini 7. If you're just a normal person who just wants to play games here and there and barely ever uses their iPad mini, you don't need to upgrade. It kind of feels like a niche item, which is odd to say about something that is literally just a tablet, but tablets in and of themselves are relatively niche still. To this day. It is an excellent tablet, and if you like this form factor, in my opinion, this is the best tablet in this form factor and size. But there are a lot of different options out there for pretty much every use case. So if you're really shopping for an iPad, take a look at everything that's available before you spend the money on the iPad mini, because honestly, there are some other options out there that are slightly cheaper or slightly more capable that you might prefer. But hey, at this point, I would love to know your thoughts on the iPad mini 7, the best small tablet. Let me know those thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll see you all in the next one.